One of the things I've noticed over thousands and thousands of job interviews that I've done, and most as a manager interviewing prospective staff, but also as a person applying for jobs myself, applying for promotions, one of the things I've noticed is you see wonderful CVs, wonderful experience, wonderful qualifications, and then you see someone sitting down at the job interview and falling to pieces. Falling to pieces because of nerves, falling to pieces because their ability to think and speak and communicate effectively under pressure just seems to fall to pieces. Myself, I've often thought that I was the best person for the job, and I've known the other applicants. It was my turn for the promotion. I had the experience, and because of various reasons, including my stutter, I've done a very poor verbal interview, and I've missed out and seen someone below me with less qualifications be promoted above me. So good morning everyone, and welcome to this Job Interview Tips webinar. My hope, my wish for all of you is to walk away with 2 or 3 skills that'll help you the next time you find yourself in that job interview process. Or maybe you as managers have got really good staff that are just not presenting well at interview. You can then coach them or help them and provide them with similar advice. So what 2 or 3 things can you do differently the next time you find yourself in the job interview situation? So Peter Dew is my name. Some of you know of me, some of you don't. My passion is helping people find their voice so that they can both effectively and confidently get their message across. My view is that just about everyone I meet has got something they want to say. They've got a story, they've got a passion, they want to advocate, they want to change something that's not right. And one of the best ways of doing this is the ability to be able to stand up before a group of people and just communicate your point of view effectively. Indeed, our job selection process requires that you confidently and effectively get before that audience and answer questions. So that's my passion, helping people find their voice so they can get their message across, whether it's in a presentation or whether it's in the job interview situation. Most of you know my background is as a person who stutters, so I struggled and for a large part of my life did not contribute, did not answer questions, avoided the spotlight. And so now that I do public speaking for my living, I want to help other people unlock their own potential. So that's enough about me. Webinar. If you haven't participated in webinars before, please ask questions as we go. There are 2 ways that you can ask questions. There's a little dialogue box, and at any time, just type straight into that question box. I'll see that and I'll be able to answer it straight away. Don't only write in questions, write in comments or write in what you're thinking, or write in that, yeah, this applies to me, or I've had a similar situation. If you don't add some comments and write some questions, it falls away from a 2-way conversation, which is what I really want to have. The second way of asking questions is in your toolbox there's a little hand. When you click on that hand, your hand will rise and I can open up your microphone. I've tested the microphones earlier on with a couple of participants and it seems to be working fine. So don't be afraid to put your hand up and I will ask you the question. Please take notes, participate, and also I think most importantly think about what I've said, and does this apply to a previous job interview, or how can you use this in your next interview? It's the application of the knowledge, it's the implementation which is going to be most important. If you learn it and you think it's nice and you take notes and then you don't implement it or you don't apply it to your own situation, then the benefits won't be there. So participate and think during the webinar. The agenda, what I'm going to cover in this 55 minutes. How to prepare for a job interview. Indeed, with many things, preparation is the key in my view. How to use a structured approach. One of the mistakes that I saw in those many people that sat before me in the job interview situation is that they just spoke. They just answered the question, but they never put a structure, a tight framework around every response. So I'll teach you how to do that. Always end strongly. So without a structure, sometimes the interview applicants just stopped speaking and just left the interview panel hanging there. So end strongly, close, let your panel know exactly what you did, what you achieved, what your position was. What do you do if you cannot answer a question? And this happens. Sometimes there will be those questions that you cannot answer. One of the biggest problems that I see in job interviews is people's inability to communicate effectively non-verbally. They may speak, but the rest of their body, their eye contact is just not communicating and being effective in the interview process. And always get feedback. Always get feedback. And how do you get feedback from the interview process? So that's the agenda today. Let's start with preparation. And in my public speaking workshops, I use an acronym or a saying, the 6 P's of preparation. Prior preparation prevents pathetically poor performance. And Robert Schuller always said spectacular performance is preceded by spectacular preparation. So those people that really nail the job interviews, they've probably done brilliant preparation. So one of the things I encourage you to do, you have a selection criteria, you have a position data form, you have a job description, you have a newspaper advertisement. You know what questions are going to be asked by reading all of that information. Build your bank or your library of questions that you have around each of the particular requirements of the job. If negotiation skills is a requirement for the job, you need to build your bank of examples of when you've used your negotiation skills successfully. And you'll have low-level examples where you just negotiated between 2 staff. You'll have high-level examples where you negotiated between 2 different departments or 2 different organisations for a large amount of money. So you need to have this library or this bank of questions ready at your fingertip. Now, I forgot to mention in my introduction, this is about job interview skills. You're now before the panel. This is not about writing an application, so I'm assuming you've already got the job interview. As you would address a selection criteria or as you would write in a letter of application, as you target your experience against each of the criteria, we'll also build a broader bank for job interview. One of the mistakes is regurgitating the same application or the same example that you wrote in the application. So by having a bank of examples or questions for each of the criteria, for each of the aspects of the job, you become more dynamic and more adaptable. Anticipate tricky questions. There are those questions that are there to make us think a little bit and to stretch us. Some of those are negative examples. So can you give me an example of where you've used your negotiation skills to resolve a conflict and you weren't able to resolve that conflict? Can you give me an example of when you've used your project management skills to work on a project that was going over budget and over time and you just could not bring that project back? When they ask these negative questions, they're not trying to see if you've failed. What they really want to know is your process of negotiation. Sometimes when you negotiate conflict, you need to bring in external mediators. The conflict can be at a greater level, at a greater complexity than a manager can handle. It may be you need to pass it up to HR, and your legal staff or your mediation staff within HR step in and help with the mediation. So don't be afraid to, or sometimes they ask for those negative examples. It's not that they want to see when you've failed. They want to know that you've got good project management skills. And the project still did not come back on budget, but you did everything right in the process and in the endeavour to bring it back on budget. And they may also ask you, so what would you do differently as a result of that failed negotiation? What would you do differently as a result of that failed project? And that's when you get those double-barreled or even triple-barreled questions. Give me an example of when you've used your interpersonal skills to resolve conflict. If you could do one thing differently to avoid that conflict in the first place, what would that be? And what advice would you give to other managers around conflict resolution? Wow, that's 3 parts in the one question. So anticipate that. I'm seeing more and more at least double-barreled questions. Then they flip it around, and then what could you do differently? Or what did you learn from that? So they'll ask the question and then they'll add a little bit. You can deal with that as 2 separate questions, and I think it's okay to say to the interview panel, okay, so you want an example of when I've used my negotiation skills? Well, there was this time, and go through, and then you can go back to the interview panel. And the second part of the question was, and they should prompt you, what did I learn from that process? Yes, so what did I learn from that process? Well, the key learnings were, and then you move into the second part of the question. If you don't remember the second branch or the third branch of a double-barrel, triple-barrel question. Practice out loud. It's amazing how many times people rewrite their resumes, and then they rewrite and they change and they check their selection criteria or their letter of application. But they then go into the interview and they speak out loud. They verbally articulate their examples and responses to hypothetical questions for the first time at the interview. So practice out loud. Practice in front of a mirror with yourself. Practice the negative questions, practice the tricky questions, practice the double-barrel questions. Practice the complex, practice the simple, and then practice with a friend or a family member. Prior preparation prevents pathetically poor performance. Less on rewriting fancy CVs and more on practicing the actual verbal, off-the-cuff job interview. And it's good with a friend or a family member asks you questions that you haven't prepared. Just helps you think, helps your mind be a little bit more plastic, and helps you respond under pressure. Sometimes the questions a family member will ask you will be not appropriate. Still have a practice at trying to answer it. So it's going to talk about structure. And those of you who are in government will already know this, but even within the private sector and within corporate organisations, behavioural-based interviews are becoming the way of doing the verbal interview. Sometimes there's those hypothetical, if this happened and this happened, how would you deal with it? But more and more they want to know, give me an example of when you've had to negotiate a win-win solution for your organisation. Give me an example of when you've used your interpersonal skills to resolve conflict. And what it's based on the fact that past behaviour, how you behaved when you're under stress or when you were in a negotiation situation, is a good predictor of future behaviour. As opposed to, if you just go with hypothetical, someone with a good theory or a good gift of the gab, so they are now verbally very eloquent, they're not as experienced as you, they're not as qualified as you, but because they've got really good verbal communication skills, they can hypothetically say, well, this is how I would deal with this project. They've never managed a project that's gone over time or over budget before, but they can nail that hypothetical question really well. Whereas if you go to a real example, and you do have an example of when you've had a multi-million-dollar project that you didn't have the right information and the time frame was cut on you by factors outside of your control, so you had to deliver in a shorter time, you know how you handled that situation. And how you handle that predicts how well you'll go with further project management skills and what you learnt from it. So that's behavioural-based interviews. So along with that comes a couple of structures. One is the STAR structure. Simply stands for state the situation, outline the task at hand, what was the action that you took, and what were the results as a result of the action, as a result of the intervention. So if we go to interpersonal conflict, the situation was I had two staff members, person A, person B, and they were fighting, and one lodged a complaint against the other and the other lodged a complaint against that person, and then other staff members, not even part of the conflict, were coming to me and saying, look, the workplace is turning really toxic, absenteeism is going up, you need to do something. So the task at hand was for me to intervene and deal with this interpersonal conflict. The conflict was being negative to the whole department and all the staff, and something needed to happen. Just leaving it was not one of the options. So the action I took was to sit down person A, interview them, just have a chat with them, get their point of view, sit down person B, do the same thing, bring person A and B together, go through with them the code of conduct, the equal opportunity rules, the harassment and bullying rules, and got them to agree that they would comply with these workplace policies and that they would behave in a respectful way to each other. I got agreement for both of them, and as a result, 12 months later, those two people are still working together. There's been no further conflict and everyone's happy. Or, as a result, person A and person B just couldn't work together. Person A asked for a transfer and is now working with an organisation somewhere else. Person B is still one of our most productive employees. Situation, paint the picture. Let the interview panel know what was the situation. It needs to be real. You can't make it hypothetical. The task at hand, the action that you took. Where possible, please use I language. So I did this and I did that. If you say we did this, and then so the team decided that this conflict was no good, so we convened a meeting and we spoke to them all. The interview panel doesn't know within the we which part of that we is yours. Sometimes within project management, I decided to convene a small subcommittee to work on this project that was going over time. We came up with a plan to bring this project back on time. That's fine. My role, so back to I, my role was to implement the plan. So to implement the plan, I did this, and I did that. So take ownership where you can. If it's an example where you have very little ownership, then you need to come up with another example from your library. The other model, it's the same model, situation, action, outcome. The situation was the action that I took as a manager, the action I took as a project manager, the action I took as a subordinate was, and the outcome. If you use one of these two models, you will make sure that you do a behavioural-based response. So this is the structure. You may or may not have realised that as we do these, that this is the beginning. This is the middle, and this is the conclusion, the outcome. This is the finish. Remember I said up front that one of the things that people did, they failed to end. They just stopped talking. So the situation was I had two people, they were fighting, they were in conflict. The action that I took was I took person A, I took person B, I read them the riot act, I sent them both on equal opportunity training, I gave them both the workplace policies, and yeah, that's what I did. And that's where they stopped speaking. That's where they stopped answering the question. But what happened? Was the problem resolved? Did the project come back on track? Was the customer complaint resolved? Did you keep that customer? Did you lose that customer? Did the interpersonal conflict escalate? What is the result? What is the outcome? So please always make sure that you end with the result or the outcome. Okay, any comments? Anyone not know about behavioural-based interview techniques? And some job interviews, if you need a technical skill, will require you to maybe do a little test. I've had an interview where someone had to use an Excel spreadsheet. They had to demonstrate the Excel spreadsheet. And I've also been to an interview where someone had to beforehand prepare a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation and deliver the PowerPoint presentation, because this job, one of the job requirements was an ability to present to an audience. But other than that, the other situations, the other criteria around, you know, the interpersonal skills, the emotional intelligence, behavioural-based job interviewing, behavioural-based questions was the way that the interview panel would ordinarily go, in government and in private. I'm just going to pause for a moment. Please write those comments in or put your hand up. There are no silly questions. There are no silly comments. And someone's just commented about STAR and SAO. There are other models as well. If you want to Google behavioural-based interview techniques, you'll find a little bit more about the process, but I think there's another couple of models that once again become acronyms, and it's about targeting and, you know, painting the picture. But use your experience, so use a real example. Use I statements, what you did rather than what we did, to strengthen your claim, to demonstrate that you did this. Okay. So the ending strongly. It is important that you really nail your job interview question. Do not sit on the fence. Do not leave the audience hanging. And just 4 things. This is about nailing your response. So the project was back on budget or was not on budget, and the reason why, but you still saved them, you know, $50 million, even though it went $10 million over budget. It looked like being a $60 million blowout, and you reduced it to a $10 million blowout. Nail your response. Do not sit on the fence. If they do a hypothetical question, how would you deal with this situation? And you say, well, I could do this. And then another thing I try is I could also try this. And yeah, I'm sure one of the two would work. And you sort of left the interview panel sitting on the fence. You've left yourself open to being seen as not decisive. So every scenario, every example that you give, finish with the outcome. And this is what happened in the end. I sometimes, for the visual learners, when I'm running this in the workshop format, I describe it as, just think of the situation, paint it as a little bit like a nursery rhyme. So Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Paint the picture. What was happening? What was the interaction, the interplay between the two people who were in conflict, or the problem that you were solving, if it's problem solving, or the project management? And then go into the action, the task and the action that you did. That's the A in the SAO and the A in the star. And then end strongly. That's, they all lived happily ever after. Of course, things don't always live happily ever after. But so think of it as a little bit of a nursery rhyme or a fairy tale. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. This is the situation. This is what happened, the 3 steps, or the negotiation process, or the conflict resolution process that you went through, and the outcome was that you negotiated a successful outcome. Please end strongly. For me, in interviewing thousands of people in my 30 years as a manager, this was probably the weakest point. And I would often say, as chairman, so what happened? What happened next? And a good interview panel will probe. They will ask for more information. If they do that with one applicant, they need to do it with all applicants. A untrained or I guess a meaner interview panel will only let you talk. They'll only let you talk. They won't stretch you or get you to fill in the gaps. Even if you know the answer, they won't do that little probe. So can you tell me a bit more about that? Just to see if you really do know the answer that you haven't fully disclosed. So you can't rely on them probing. You need to finish strong yourself. So what do you do if you can't answer the question? And I really don't think it's a big problem. So some rules for not answering the questions. Don't make it up. Don't claim that you did something that you didn't do. One of the things that's happening more and more is that interview panels are phoning up your referees. The old written referee report that references would send in is no longer seen as a real way of checking that the person can do what they can do. So what I would do if I was interviewing you, I would ring up your referee, which is probably your last manager or your last supervisor or somewhere in your last job, and say that Phil mentioned that he resolved this project that was going over budget and over time. The project was the ABC project, and what Phil said was he was able to, by doing this and doing that, bring that project back on budget. And then your referee might say, well, yeah, Phil was involved with that project, but only as a team member. He didn't lead that project. It wasn't his ideas. And so all of a sudden your credibility's gone down. Also, the referees must tell the truth. The referee cannot say, oh yes, Phil did do that, because if later on in Phil's employment with me, Phil cannot do that, the referee that said he did have that skill, he did have that capability, is vicariously liable. So don't make stuff up. If you can't do it, you can't do it. It's not the time to bluff it. Just be honest. Learn from it. Remember your library of stories, your library of examples. You get asked a question, you can't answer it, then obviously that is one of those things you add to that library. Get that skill or get that knowledge. If you don't have that particular skill, you haven't done negotiation skills, then enroll in an online course. Do a short course on negotiation skills and be ready the next time. That's what you do if you cannot answer the question. As I said, it's not a problem, in my view. Sometimes the way you get up the career ladder, the way you change professions, is you put yourself out there a little bit. You stretch yourself with job interviews. When you go the next level up, the complexity of that job is higher than the job you're doing. So it could be that one of the questions, one of the requirements is the ability to lead teams. And if the question comes, can you give an example of when you've had to lead a team of 10 or more people? How would you describe your leadership style, and what did you do to create that culture within your team? And if you've never been a team leader, you cannot answer that question. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't have applied for the job, because sometimes no one else suitable will apply as well, and they will see you as being very good, very confident in all aspects, but lacking experience in managing a team of 10. And they may still consider you, or they may consider you for the next time round. And you can go away, and part of being ready next time is that if you can't meet that sort of experience criteria, you need to go back to your other job and say, how can I get that experience? You need to go back to your old job, your old manager. Hey, I need an opportunity. I need an acting opportunity to manage a team of 10 people at some stage. Or can you get that experience somewhere else? It's not a problem if you can't answer a question that is in fact stretching you. If it's a question that you should know something about, and then if it's a question that you do work in that field and it's just couched a little bit too complex, then be ready the next time, learn from it. Okay. And one of the things that people may not realize, and this relates back to, okay, so you can't answer the question. One of the things that people don't realize is that you can answer the question from your life experience. I'm going to explain to you the difference between your CV and your resume. Within Australia, they are often used interchangeably, but your CV, your curriculum vitae, is your school of life. It's your life learning. That you've learned on the job, that you've learned within your university qualification, that you've learned within your organisation. It's also that you've learned in your clubs, in your volunteer work, in your home life as a mother, as a father, as a sporting coach. Your resume is a targeted subset of your life skills, so a targeted subset of your CV that you put on a piece of paper to claim or to demonstrate that you're suitable for that position. So sometimes if you can't answer the question, you've got to delve a little bit deeper and bring something from outside in your CV. Let me give you an example. My background is a microbiologist, a medical scientist. Work with blood, blood grouping, tissue typing, virology, blood infections. So really good health and medical and microbiological and hematological background, really good. The last promotion I got before I started my public speaking business was I was promoted to manager of Donate West, WA's organ donation agency. So they needed someone with leadership skills, and I had a big team in my pathology lab that I managed, really good management skill, financial management skill, understanding of medical terminology, understanding of organ donation, tissue typing, blood matching, all of those things. Brilliant. I had it all down. And then one of the criteria was extensive experience in public relations and marketing. I'm a medical scientist. I work in a pathology lab in the basement of a hospital. Where do I learn to do marketing? You don't market pathology services. You're not allowed to. It's illegal to market or promote pathology services. So I was stuck, and I could have said, look, sorry, at this stage I have no marketing or public relations experience. However, at the time I had just been the convener and the chairperson of a world convention being held in Perth. It was the 2004 World Conference for People Who Stutter. I was the chairperson and the convener. I did all the marketing work, I did all the radio, the PR, I did all the press releases, and I was able to run the best World Congress in the history of that particular conference. We had more people come down under to Perth than went anywhere else. And during the conference, I had to manage the media as we promoted our keynote speakers from around the world and what they were speaking on. They would come off the stage, and then there'd be ABC Radio, there would be Channel 7 TV waiting, and I had to manage all that. So from something unrelated to my work, my qualifications, my job, I was able to, and bluff is not the right word, I was able to draw from my CV, address the selection criteria, demonstrate to the people that I in fact had enough skills and experience around public relations and marketing that I could do the same thing for organ donation. Sometimes you've got to think outside the square. So as you build your bank of questions, look at your entire CV, previous jobs, awards you've won. I'm going to pause for a moment. Any questions, any comments? Has anyone else previously had to use something outside of their normal, narrow working life? I'd be interested in your comments. And someone has mentioned that within their sporting club, they were club president, and there was about 5 teams within the club, and they had to chair all the meetings and do all the run all the AGMs and speak at the AGMs, and they were able to bring that into one of their job applications. Yeah, brilliant. It's valid skills, and how you behave before a group of people speaking and chairing a meeting, and there may be 100 people at that club, is a good predictor of how well you'll do chairing a meeting and speaking before a group of people within a work environment. Okay. Moving on very quickly, so we're moving nicely. I want to talk about non-verbal communication. And up the top right hand of the slide, I've written Malcolm Gladwell. The first 15 seconds. Malcolm Gladwell did some research into job interviews. And what he discovered was that your non-verbal communication is really determining whether you get the job or not very quickly. And the first 15 seconds, the interview panel has generally made an assessment within that first 15 seconds, which is scary. 15 seconds is you walk in the door, the handshake, the smile, the greeting. Hi, my name's Peter. It's a real pleasure to be here. Nice to meet you all. That genuine handshake, the eye contact. I take my seat confidently. I smile, and then I sit up with, nice, confident and comfortable body language. What Malcolm Gladwell did was he looked at research where they video recorded a whole 1-hour job interview. So you've been with me at the end of this webinar for 1 hour. Let's say that was recorded, my interaction, and this was live. You were then asked to rate my soft communication skills, so my emotional intelligence, on a scale with 8 particular traits. That might be my honesty, my loyalty, my integrity, my reliability, those soft skills. You know my degree, I'm a medical scientist. You know I worked in pathology for 30 years, and when I finished I was a fairly high-level manager, and all of those things are equal, and you've got 3 or 4 people that have got the same skills, the same stake for that job. So you're looking at the other things. So after 1 hour, you rate me on those 8 personality traits. Malcolm Gladwell then and they recorded the whole hour, spliced the first 15 seconds, as I said, the handshake, the good morning everybody, then took that video downtown, and this was in America, so downtown, and showed the 15 seconds to 20 random people in the street who knew nothing about this, just said, hey, can you watch this video? And this 8-point rating scale, can you then rate the person on that 8-point rating scale? The correlation was 80%. So the people in the street, in determining how loyal, how reliable your integrity, got the same score as the interview panel. For all practical purposes, 80% correlation within the first 15 seconds. Really important stuff. So you need to use pause when you speak. You need to make eye contact. The eye contact needs to be with the asker of the question and then with everyone else in the interview panel. I would start with whoever asked the question, then I'd deliver my response equally to the 3 or the 4 people in the interview panel, and I would then go back and close my question, conclude with the person who asked the question. I would have credible body language, which means I'd have a steady voice, and my palms would be pointing down. You need to eliminate any distraction. I don't know whether you play with pens or you twiddle your rings or your fingers. You need to know that. Practice in front of a mirror. What is your body and your gestures doing when you're speaking? You need to be genuine and authentic, so please don't throw a switch. I'm now in my job interview mode. Please don't throw that job interview switch. Mirror and match the panel. They move forward, you move forward a little bit. If they sit back a bit, you sit back just a little bit. Show your passion and show your passion for your topic and demonstrate the right level of energy. You need to match the energy of the interview panel and be a little bit higher. Some interview panels can be really straight, really cold, and not give anything away. You need to come in with a little bit more energy than that. You need to look excited and be passionate. Don't come in as an evangelical preacher, clapping your hands, jumping up and down and being really excited to be there, because that'll cause that disjoint. Now, you can build your energy as you notice the interview panel is becoming more engaged and you're starting to connect with them. You can raise your energy and your passion even a little bit further. Just stay slightly ahead of the pack in terms of your energy level. I also run a webinar on effective body language. I go into what's credible and what's approachable, your credible voice, your credible non-verbals, to a lot more extent. If that is something that interests you, then do let me know. I don't have time to really go into the depth of being credible. Think of your pilot, the captain of your aeroplane, and I just flew back from Melbourne last night. When he speaks and he comes across the PA system, this is your captain speaking. We have a 4-hour flying time. We'll be cruising at 30,000 feet. I'll get back to you when we get closer to Perth. His voice is deliberately very credible. He's sending information. He's not asking you. He's not negotiating with you. Then the cabin crew come on. This is your cabin crew speaking. It's a pleasure to have you on board, and we want to make this journey for you as safe and as enjoyable as possible. Please, if we can be of any assistance, just call one of the crew members and we will see what we can do to help you out. That rise and fall of the voice, very approachable. But in job interview, you need to be credible at some stage. When you're going through the tasks and the actions that you did and how it ended up, you need to be credible. Really worthwhile building your awareness of your non-verbal communication for job interview. Completely different thing for standing up and speaking, but not dissimilar. Look organised. First impressions count. The first 15 seconds. In fact, I went to another seminar recently where I was told that women had formed an impression of me within the first 4 to 5 seconds, and men have formed an impression of me within the first 7 to 8 seconds. So men give me a little bit more time. So first impressions do count. So if you want to know a little bit more about this kind of stuff, body language in the workplace, Alan and Barbara Peace, they do other body language books as well. They're probably some of the #1 experts in Australia on non-verbal communication. So, some things to make sure you do the right thing. Your manners go a long way, so the polite, the handshake. Third point down, you'll notice it's not just any handshake, it's a friendly and firm handshake. Matching and mirroring the handshake that's given. Don't crush the hand of a female interview panel member. Don't hand out a limp hand to a man that has a strong handshake. You need to mirror and match in the handshake. I remember Mark Latham, Labor leader, John Howard, Liberal leader, before the election. This is a few years ago. They were both on radio, and Mark Latham was on radio, first Talkback Radio, and John Howard was waiting to go on, and Mark Latham came out of the studio, grabbed John Howard's hand and crushed it and shook it up and down, and you could see the grimace on John Howard's face. And this was shown on national news. And yeah, ladies, only take one bag into the interview room. If you've got a laptop and a handbag, you need to leave one of them somewhere. If you've got a satchel with some notes and a handbag, you need to leave the handbag somewhere because you probably want the satchel with the notes. 2 bags, 2 things, 2 items, spells, and I know you're going to be a really organised person, spells disorganised. I go in there with nothing and I'm the most unorganised person that there is, and people look at me and say, wow, he's organised. Or I might bring one set of notes if there is that time where you write questions or you write down some notes before the interview. Simple things like polishing your shoes, front and back. Barbara and Alan Peace say that interview panel members, as you leave, they will look at the back of your shoes. They've already seen the front, so you've got nice polished front shoes, but did you bother to polish the back of your shoes? Do you have attention to detail, or was that just a quick, slide it up and down on the back of your trouser leg to give it a bit of a spit polish before you walk into the room because you didn't really take the time to polish your shoes front and back? So there's just a little bit of interview etiquette. Some really good research about your body language and your posture and your gestures prior to job interview. And this is on one of my blogs, and it's from an author. So go to my website and you'll see blog, and it's actually on page number 7, so you've got to go back quite a few pages. You could put that link in, /journal / current page = 7. And Amy Cuddy is a researcher at Harvard Business School, and she looks at, and this is a little TED Talk, so you can watch it. Only goes for 20 minutes. TED Talks are brilliant if you want to become more confident as a speaker, as an interviewer, as an interviewee, as a presenter, thinking and speaking off the cuff. TED Talks, really good. Amy Cuddy says that just by changing your non-verbal communication 2 to 5 minutes before you walk in the interview room, you can have a great change in the outcome of that interview. So I just want you to imagine in your mind you're sitting outside waiting to be called into the interview panel. How are you sitting? Are you sitting on your hands? Have you got your hands between your knees and you're just sort of bent over in a nice sort of small passive I don't really want to be here sort of body language? What Amy Cuddy has shown is by assuming big, confident, strong body language, hands on hips, arms folded, deep breathing. Before you walk into the interview room, please don't do hands on hips, arms folded at the interview. I'm saying this is the 2 to 5 minutes before you go into job interview. Then when you go into interview, you try to be confident and you try to be credible. You come across stronger and more confident than if you spend the 5 minutes beforehand adopting some sort of passive hands between your knees, sort of rubbing your palms up and down, hands sort of sitting, hands on your seat and you sitting on them. So that small body language versus confident and credible body language before going into the interview makes a big difference. Watch the video, or if you can't find the video on my website, just go to TED.com. There it is down there, TED.com, and Google Amy Cuddy, Your Body Language Shapes Who You Are. Really powerful stuff. Worth investing in some of your non-verbal communications. Remember I said at the beginning, people write and rewrite their CV and their job application, and it's not quite right, and they rewrite it and they rewrite it. Then they just go in and hope they're going to get the interview. And I know you've got to get to the interview stage, so the writing of your CV and your application are important, but not knowing what your body is doing and not being effective is also equally as important. Any questions on your non-verbal communication? Is everyone happy with that? Who practices their body language before they go into a job interview? No one. So what the body language does for you, it gives you the self-belief before you go in. It's modeling strong and confident body language, and it's allowing your personality and the true you, the genuine, authentic you, to shine and come through. So model confident, strong, assertive behavior, body language before, and then when you go into the room, you'll be able to come across as looking confident and credible. Always get feedback. This is one of the mistakes that I've also found being a manager and with the job interviewing process. Some people are really suitable, they look good, and they've just made a couple of simple mistakes at the interview process, and they've been pipped by someone else, and they don't seek feedback. So when you can't answer a question, one of the things was find out and fix it so the next time you can. This is what feedback does. And it was Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. And I like this other quote down the bottom right by David Dunning. The road to self-insight runs through other people. Learning what you're doing, learning how well you're going at job interview comes through the eyes of other people. You need to ask for feedback after every job interview. Let's say you're successful, I would still get feedback. What could have you done to make that job interview, that demonstration of your right and your capability for that job, what could have you done to make that even higher? I always get feedback. I'm going to pause for a moment for the last Q&A. Please type them in. Has any of this been useful? Please type in any comments. Just while I'm waiting for some comments to come in. So brilliant. Someone's found that very useful. Who was aware that their body language at job interviews probably accounting for up to about 50%? Yeah, not many. So just in summary, a couple of people came late. Do your preparation. And now part of your preparation is knowing what is your body language saying. And someone's just asked, can you have the notes? Yes, you can. Those of you who'd like a copy of these slides, please send me an email and I'll send you the PDF version of the slides. Use that structured approach. This is the STAR or the SAO. End strongly. Nail your response. What do you do if you can't answer questions? Have that philosophy, have that plan, especially when you're stretching, guys, when you're stretching. And that's part of being able to grow, is stretching. Non-verbals, invest in it, always get feedback. Got a workshop in Karratha on the 24th. I've got a couple of people in Karratha on the webinar. It is full. It is full. I'm very happy to say the 24th of Feb is full, but I'll be back. For those of you in Melbourne or Perth, whole series of Melbourne workshops, including Bendigo and Mildura in March, late March, early April, and then also back in Perth in April. Send me that email. Hey, can you send me the notes for the webinar, and I'll send them out to you. And go and watch Amy Cuddy on my website. And if I can be of any further use to you, please send me an email. And